I was there, sitting at the corner table by the window, the one with the cracked vinyl seat and the view of the parking lot, nursing my third coffee of the morning and watching the highway the way you do when you've got nowhere particular to be and the road outside is the only thing moving. I watched the whole thing. Watched the men in their pressed shirts walk in like they owned the place, which was precisely the point, because they were there to make sure they would. Watched the county rep tip his chin like he was doing her a favor just by showing up. Watched the lawyer shuffle his papers and avoid eye contact with anyone who might make him feel something about what he was doing. And I watched the biker come through the door. 40, maybe 42. Road dust on everything. Jacket, boots, the crease of his jaw. He wasn't looking for trouble. He was looking for coffee. He took one look at what was happening at the counter, and he said it. 3 words. That's all. Leave her alone. Not a request. Not a question. They left. That was the worst decision they ever made. If you're new here, hit subscribe and tap the bell. We tell stories about the road and the people on it. This one's just getting started. Her name was Maya Reyes, and the diner her father had built on the edge of Route 66 in Solano, New Mexico, a town of 900 people and one traffic light that nobody paid much attention to, was the last thing he'd left her. Ray Reyes had opened the diner in 1987 with a borrowed griddle, a second-hand espresso machine that worked about half the time, and the particular stubbornness of a man who had decided that this stretch of road needed a real place to eat, and that he was the one who was going to build it. He called it Ray's. Not because he lacked imagination, but because he thought a diner should be honest about what it was. For 34 years, Ray's had been the kind of place that Route 66 used to make by accident, and now mostly didn't make at all. The kind of place where truckers knew the coffee would be hot, and the portions wouldn't insult them. Where the booth in the back had hosted 3 marriage proposals and 1 divorce conversation. Where the pie came from a recipe Ray had written in a spiral notebook that he kept under the counter and never shared with anyone, not even Maya, though she'd eventually figured it out by watching him enough times. Ray died on a Tuesday in March, between the breakfast rush and the lunch crowd, in the small office behind the kitchen where he kept the ledgers and a photograph of Maya's mother, who'd left when Maya was 4. His heart gave out without much warning. The cook found him. Maya was in Albuquerque, at a nursing certification exam she'd been studying for over 6 months. The last step toward a career she'd been building quietly alongside the diner. The one her father had encouraged, without ever asking her to choose between it and him. She drove back to Solano that afternoon. She never went back to finish the exam. She has not left since. That was 11 months ago. The certification paperwork is still in the glove compartment of her truck. She hasn't decided what to do with it yet. Some decisions take longer than others, and some things have to be settled before you can know what you actually want. What Maya didn't know yet, couldn't have known, because the machinery of it had been running quietly in offices she'd never visited, was that a company called Meridian Development Group had been acquiring properties along this stretch of 66 for the better part of 2 years. Not loudly, not aggressively, quietly, the way things that intend to be permanent tend to start. Meridian wanted to build a travel center, a corporate one, the kind with a gas station that had 18 pumps and a food court with 6 franchise options, and a trucker's lounge with showers and a loyalty points program. The kind that made sense on a spreadsheet and killed everything within 5 miles that had been making sense to actual human beings for decades. The site they'd identified was a half-mile stretch of Route 66 frontage in Solano. Ray's Diner sat in the middle of it. The man running Meridian's local acquisition was named Patrick Sutton. He operated out of a leased office in Albuquerque, and had a particular talent for finding the pressure points in small situations. He wasn't cruel. He was methodical. He'd spent 18 months buying out or squeezing out 6 other properties along the target corridor, and he was good at identifying which approach worked on which person. He'd sent a rep to Maya twice. Both times, she'd declined. Politely the first time, less politely the second. Sutton had escalated. He had a relationship with the county development office, the kind that counties in financial stress tend to develop with companies that promise tax revenue and construction jobs. The county rep assigned to Solano was a man named Dennis Hale, who wore khakis and drove a county SUV and had a way of making official pressure sound like friendly concern. He also had a lawyer, firm out of Albuquerque, 2 partners, 1 associate. The associate's name was Kevin Marsh, 29 years old, 3 years out of law school, and already well practiced in the art of presenting unfavorable options as if he were doing you a favor by explaining them. They came on a Wednesday morning at 9:15. Maya had been at the counter since 6. She was always at the counter since 6. She'd taken over the early shift herself because she couldn't afford another staff member after losing 2 to better-paying jobs in the past 3 months. The morning rush, 7 truckers, 4 locals, a family passing through in a minivan, had cleared by 8:30, and she was restocking the condiment holders and not thinking about the certified letter that had arrived on Monday, because thinking about it hadn't helped the first 40 times. The certified letter was from Meridian's lawyers. It referenced a county ordinance she hadn't heard of. It suggested, in the careful language of people who have learned to threaten without technically threatening, that certain code violations recently identified at the property might present complications for continued operation, and that these complications could be resolved through a conversation about the property's future. Maya had read it twice, put it under the counter next to the pie recipe notebook, and made a fresh pot of coffee. When Hale and Marsh came through the door at 9:15, she knew who they were before they introduced themselves. Small towns move information faster than any network. "Ms. Reyes," Hale said, with the smile of a man who had rehearsed concern. "We were hoping we could sit down for a few minutes." "Counter or booth?" Maya said. They took the booth nearest the door. Maya brought them water. She didn't bring coffee. That was a decision she made without fully thinking about it, and she didn't examine it too closely. Marsh opened a folder. He began explaining the county ordinance. He explained it carefully, professionally, in the tone of someone laying out facts that had nothing to do with him personally. The diner's electrical system had been flagged. The parking lot drainage was non-compliant. There was a question about the grease trap that would require inspection. Each item, individually, was manageable. Together, Marsh explained, the compliance timeline would be significant. And during a compliance remediation period, the county had authority to restrict certain operating conditions. He said it without looking at her. Maya stood on the other side of the counter and listened. Her hands were flat on the formica. She kept them still. "We understand this is a difficult situation," Hale said, "and Meridian has asked us to convey that their offer remains open. They've actually increased it since the last conversation." He slid a paper across the counter. Maya looked at it. She did not pick it up. "My father built this diner," she said. Her voice was even. She had her father's voice when she needed it, the particular flat steadiness of a man who didn't raise his volume because he didn't need to. He built it in 1987. He worked this counter for 34 years. He died in that office back there. She nodded toward the kitchen. "I'm not selling it." Hale spread his hands in the gesture of a man who finds this unreasonable but is too professional to say so directly. "Miss Reyes, the compliance issues are real. We're not—" The bell above the door rang. He came in the way road-worn people come into diners, without announcement, without looking at anyone in particular. Scanning the room the way you scan a place you've never been but understand immediately because you've been in 1,000 versions of it. Road dust on the jacket, on the boots, in the lines around his eyes. He was carrying a helmet, the kind that had been used in actual weather, and showed it. He looked at the booth near the door. He looked at the counter. He looked at Maya. He sat at the counter, 2 stools from the end, set his helmet on the stool beside him and said, "Coffee, please, if you've got it going." Maya turned to pour it. Behind her, Hale had resumed. The compliance timeline, the remediation costs, the reality of the situation. The biker received his coffee. He wrapped both hands around the mug. He listened. Marsh was into the specifics now. The numbers, the timeline, the window for Meridian's offer. His voice had the rhythm of a man who had delivered this particular presentation before and had calibrated it for maximum effect. He slid another document across to Maya. Maya's hands were still flat on the counter. The document was in front of her. She hadn't looked at it. "Ms. Reyes," Marsh said, "I understand this isn't what you want to hear, but the practical reality, leave her alone." It was quiet, not loud. 3 words landing in the room the way a hand laid flat on a table lands, without drama, but with enough weight to stop what's happening. Hale looked at the man at the counter. Marsh looked at him. The biker was looking at Maya, not at them, at her, as if checking something. Then he turned and looked at them, and his expression was the expression of someone who has seen this particular situation clearly and has no uncertainty about what it is. "She said no," he said. "Twice, from what I understand. That makes this a 3rd visit that she didn't invite." He took a sip of his coffee. "So, we done here?" Hale's expression shifted through several registers. He settled on professionally measured. "Sir, this is a private business conversation between people she didn't invite," the biker said again. Not louder, just again. The way you repeat something when you think the other person might have missed it the first time. Marsh looked at his folder. Hale looked at the man at the counter, the road dust, the jacket, the complete absence of urgency in his posture, and made a calculation. The calculation was wrong. "I'm afraid I'm going to have to ask you to mind your business," Hale said. The biker set down his mug. He turned on the stool to face them fully. He was 40, maybe 42, with dark eyes that had the particular quality of eyes that have spent a long time watching things and no longer wasted energy on pretense. "Her diner," he said. "Her business. I'm sitting in it. That makes it my business, too." He paused. "And I'll tell you what else is my business. I spent 6 years as a federal investigator before I got on this bike. I know what a coercive compliance referral looks like. I know what a coordinated acquisition strategy looks like. And I know what a manufactured code violation looks like." He held Marsh's gaze. "That ordinance you're citing was adopted 14 months ago. The properties Meridian has acquired along this corridor were all flagged under it within the same 60-day window. I'd be interested to know who initiated those referrals." The booth was very quiet. Hale's professionally measured expression had become something else. Marsh had stopped looking at his folder. "I don't know who you are," Hale said carefully. "No," the biker said. "You don't." He picked up his coffee again. "But I'd think about that before you decide whether to keep sitting in this woman's diner." They left. Marsh put his folder in his bag without making eye contact with anyone. Hale said something about following up, which landed in the room and was absorbed by no one. The bell above the door rang twice, once when Marsh went through, once when Hale followed. The diner was quiet. Maya stood on her side of the counter. She was looking at the door. Then she looked at the man at the counter. "You want more coffee?" she said. He held out his mug. His name was Cole Garrett, and before he'd been on this bike for the past 3 years, covering routes he chose more or less by instinct and stopping when something pulled at him, he'd been something considerably more specific. He didn't tell her all of it at once. He told her pieces of it that afternoon, sitting at the counter while the lunch crowd came and went, and she moved between the kitchen pass-through and the register without stopping. He was good at talking while someone else was working. He'd had practice, he said, though he didn't explain what kind yet. She learned that he'd been a special agent with the FBI's Financial Crimes Division for 11 years, that the last case he'd worked before he left had been a land acquisition scheme in 3 states that had used the same coordinated code enforcement strategy she was experiencing. Manufactured violations, coordinated timing, county officials who found it convenient to look in a particular direction. He'd built the case over 22 months. The prosecution had secured convictions on 4 of the 7 targets. The other 3 had walked on a technicality that still sat in him the way certain things sit. Present, unresolved. The specific weight of a thing you did exactly right that still came out wrong. He'd put in his resignation the week after the sentencing. He'd bought the bike, a dark steel Harley Softail that he'd put over 40,000 miles on in 3 years. And he'd ridden. Not away from anything exactly, more like towards something he hadn't named yet. He'd heard about Solano from a trucker at a rest stop outside Amarillo who'd mentioned, in the way that people mention things to strangers on the road when they think someone might want to know, that there was a good diner on 66 in New Mexico where a young woman was trying to hold on to her father's place against a company that wanted the land. Something in that had pulled at him. He'd pointed the bike west. "You rode here because of a tip from a trucker," Maya said. She wasn't quite smiling. She was assessing. "I stopped here because a trucker mentioned good coffee," Cole said. "The rest of it I walked into." She studied him across the counter. She had her father's gray eyes. She'd been told this often enough that she'd stopped registering it as a compliment and just accepted it as information. She used those eyes the way her father had, to measure things quietly before she said anything about them. "You said you know what a coordinated acquisition looks like," she said. "What do you actually know about this one?" Cole put his mug down. "How long do you have?" "Till 3, she said. "Then the dinner prep starts." He talked till 3. What he knew was substantial, and what he suspected was more so. Meridian Development Group had been incorporated 4 years ago in Delaware, a state chosen, as most such companies chose it, for the specific qualities of its corporate structure that tended to be useful when you preferred not to be looked at directly. Its principles were listed, but layered through 2 holding companies that required some patience to trace. Cole had patience. He'd spent the 3 weeks before arriving in Solano doing what he still did instinctively when something pulled at him. Research. Quiet and thorough. The kind that didn't announce itself. Meridian's backing came, ultimately, from a real estate investment trust based in Phoenix. The trust had 2 board members who also sat on the board of a construction company that had won the contracts for 2 previous travel center builds along Interstate 40. The pattern wasn't complicated. It was just buried. "They're not just buying land," Cole said. "They're building a position for a much larger contract. The travel center is the anchor. Once it's built and operational, they apply for a state highway service designation. That's the permit that puts you on the official signage. Once you have that, you're in every GPS database as a recommended stop. Every truck dispatcher routes through you. You become infrastructure. The economics change completely." Maya was quiet. She was wiping down the counter, not because it needed it, but because she thought better with her hands moving. My father knew something was coming, she said. He never said it directly, but the last 6 months he kept the books differently, more detailed, more organized. She paused. Like he was building something he wanted someone else to be able to read. Cole looked at her. "Where are the books?" he said. Maya was still for a moment. Then she went to the office behind the kitchen and came back with a binder. Not a thin one. 3 inches of paper, organized by date, going back 14 months. Cole opened it. He spent 40 minutes reading it at the counter while Maya started the dinner prep. He read the way he used to read case files, not skimming, actually reading, looking for the logic underneath the surface of the numbers. What Ray Reyes had documented, without any particular understanding of what he was documenting, was a pattern. The dates Meridian's people had first approached him, the dates of the county inspection notices that had followed, the names of other business owners on the corridor who'd told him, over coffee and in parking lots, about their own experiences. One of them, a man who'd run a tire shop half a mile west, had mentioned a specific county official by name, Dennis Hale. "Your father was building a case," Cole said. Maya came to the pass-through and looked at him. Her expression was the expression of someone receiving information they'd half known and were now having confirmed. "He always said the right information in the right hands was worth more than any lawyer," she said quietly. Cole looked at the binder. Then he looked at her. He was right. That night, after the dinner crowd cleared and the last of the staff had gone, Cole sat in the corner booth with his laptop and the binder and worked. Maya stayed. She restocked the pie case and ran the end-of-day numbers and brought him coffee twice without being asked. And around 10:30, she sat down across from him, and they ate the last of the green chili stew from the pot that had been on since morning. He told her what he was building. The pattern in Ray's records, combined with the corporate structure he'd traced in Albuquerque, was enough to support a formal complaint to the state attorney general's office, specifically to the division that handled anti-competitive land acquisition practices, a division that had been understaffed for years but had recently received a new director who had a documented interest in exactly this kind of case. He had a contact there, former colleague, someone who would return his call and actually read what he sent. "This takes time," he said. "Filing the complaint is a week. The investigation, if they open one, could be months." "What happens in the meantime?" Maya asked. "They keep applying pressure. More code referrals, probably. Maybe something with the health department. They'll try to make operating costly enough that selling looks rational." Maya looked at her father's binder on the table between them. "Then I keep operating," she said. Cole looked at her for a moment. She said it the way her father had probably said everything that mattered, without volume, without performance, just as a statement of fact about what was going to happen. "There's one more thing," he said. He turned the laptop toward her. On the screen was a website, a regional news outlet based in Albuquerque, the kind that covered stories the larger outlets didn't have the patience for. A reporter named Alma Torres. She covered 2 similar cases in the past 3 years. She knows how to read corporate structure. And she knows what a story looks like. Maya studied the screen. "You know her?" "We've talked." He paused. "She's been looking for the Meridian angle for 6 months. She has pieces of it. What's in your father's binder is the piece she's missing." Maya was quiet for a while. Outside, the highway moved, a truck, then nothing, then a car whose headlights swept across the diner window and continued west. "My father talked about this place like it was alive," she said. "Not like a business, like something that was supposed to be here. She looked at the window, at the dark highway. He said Route 66 didn't need to be famous. It just needed people who refused to let it disappear. Cole said nothing. He'd learned, over a long time, that some things needed to be said in the presence of someone who could simply receive them. "Okay," Maya said. "We file the complaint. We call the reporter. And I open at 6 tomorrow, the same as every day." Cole closed the laptop. He picked up his coffee. "One more thing." She looked at him. "I'm going to need somewhere to stay for a few weeks. Is there a motel in Solano?" Maya almost smiled. It was brief, and it didn't quite finish, but it arrived. "There's a motel," she said. "It's across the street. The owner's name is Frank, and he'll charge you $62 a night and won't ask any questions, which in this town passes for luxury." Before we go any further, drop where you're watching from in the comments. And if this story is worth your time, hit subscribe. We read every single comment. Now let's see what happened next. The weeks that followed had the particular texture of difficult things being done steadily. Cole filed the complaint on a Friday. His contact at the Attorney General's office called back on Monday. Not to promise anything, but to say she'd read it and that it was going to the right desk. That was enough for now. Alma Torres drove down from Albuquerque on a Wednesday and spent 4 hours in the diner with Ray's binder and a voice recorder, and the specific energy of a reporter who has found the thread she's been pulling at for months and can feel it starting to give. She drank 3 cups of coffee and ate 2 slices of pie, and told Maya at the end of it that the story would run within 2 weeks. In the meantime, Meridian continued. A health department inspector arrived on a Thursday morning with a clipboard and the careful expression of someone who has been told what to find. Cole was at the counter. He didn't speak. He watched the inspector work, and when the inspector began documenting a ventilation issue that had not existed the previous week, Cole photographed the inspection form with his phone and sent it to his contact at the AG's office with a timestamp and 3 lines of context. 2 days later, the health department visit was flagged internally as potentially irregular. The inspector filed no citation. Hale came back once, alone, without Marsh. He sat in the booth by the door and asked for coffee. Maya brought it, because she was her father's daughter, and her father had never refused coffee to anyone. And he looked at the man at the counter for a long time before he said anything. "I want you to know," Hale said, not to Cole, to Maya, "that I understand this situation may have been handled in ways that weren't appropriate." He said it with the tone of a man who has been doing something for long enough that he's learned to hear it clearly only when it's almost too late. Maya looked at him. "My father used to say," she said, "that it's never too late to do the right thing. But it gets more expensive every day you wait." Hale sat with his coffee for a few minutes. Then he left. 2 weeks later, he provided a voluntary statement to the Attorney General's investigator. It described, in careful and remorseful detail, the nature of his arrangement with Meridian's representatives and the specific instructions he'd received regarding the code enforcement referrals. It was, as these things go, the most useful thing Dennis Hale had done in 3 years of public service. If you've made it this far, you already know this story is worth sharing. Send it to someone who needs to hear it tonight. And subscribe if you haven't yet. There are more stories where this one came from. Alma Torres's story ran on a Tuesday. By Thursday, it had been picked up by 2 regional outlets and 1 national trade publication that covered transportation infrastructure development. By Friday, Meridian's Albuquerque office had not returned 3 calls from reporters. Cole was at the counter when Maya saw the story's view count on her phone. "Is this real?" she said. "That's real," he said. She set the phone down. She picked it up again. She set it down. The Attorney General's office opened a formal investigation on the following Monday. The corporate structure Cole had traced was publicly cited in the announcement. 2 of Meridian's principals declined comment through a spokesperson. The construction company that shared board members with the investment trust released a statement saying it had no knowledge of and no involvement in the land acquisition activities under investigation, which was technically true and completely beside the point. Sutton closed the Albuquerque office quietly at the end of the month. He relocated to Texas, where he began working on a different project, though that is a different story, and one that is, as of this telling, still unresolved. The formal investigation took 8 months. It resulted in findings against Meridian on 3 counts, including the coordinated use of county code enforcement mechanisms for anti-competitive purposes. Dennis Hale received a formal reprimand and was required to complete an ethics course, which he completed and which, by all accounts, he took seriously. The County Development Office revised its inspection referral protocols. Ray's Diner stayed open. Cole was at the counter when the investigation findings were announced. He'd been at the counter most mornings for the past 4 months, which had become a fact of the place, the way certain facts become facts, without announcement, simply by repeating until they stop requiring explanation. He'd stopped staying at Frank's motel around the 2nd month. There was a storage room behind the kitchen that Ray had talked about converting for years. Maya had converted it. It was small, and it had a window that looked at the highway, and it suited a man who had spent 3 years not being in any particular place just fine. The morning the findings came through, Maya set a cup of coffee in front of him before he asked, and he read the summary on her phone while she finished the breakfast setup. "It's over," she said. "The investigation is," he said. "The diner's not over. That's the point." She looked at him. In the months since he'd walked through the door on that Wednesday morning, she had come to know his face the way you come to know a place you spend a lot of time in. Not just its features, but its weather, the way the light moved across it at different hours, what a particular expression actually meant. "You were looking for something," she said, "before you came here." He held his coffee. "I've been looking for something since I left the bureau." "Did you find it?" He looked at the diner, the counter, the booths, the pie case, the window that faced the highway. The photograph of Ray Reyes that Maya had hung by the register, a man in an apron with his father's gray eyes and an expression of complete intention. "I think I found where it lives," he said. It was an honest answer, and he gave it carefully, because the careful version was the true version. Maya was quiet for a moment. Outside, a truck went by on the highway, westbound, and its sound faded out, and the morning settled back into itself. "You could stay," she said. He looked at her. She wasn't asking him to. She wasn't trying to tip the scale. She was stating a fact and leaving the rest to him, the same way she stated everything that mattered, without volume, without performance, as if the truth of a thing was sufficient and didn't need help getting into the room. "The bike needs a real service," he said. "I've been putting it off." "Frank's nephew has a shop," Maya said. "He's good." "How long would it take?" She considered this with the seriousness it deserved. "Week, maybe 2. Depends what he finds." Cole picked up his mug. "I'll talk to Frank's nephew," he said. That was in April. In June, Cole Garrett and Maya Reyes had a conversation in the storage room that he'd made into something resembling a home. A conversation that was honest and direct and occasionally difficult, and ultimately the kind that 2 careful people have when they've been moving towards something for long enough that it's become more complicated not to say it than to say it. In September, the storage room got a proper door. In November, Maya took the photograph of her father from beside the register and moved it to the wall above the counter, where everyone who sat down could see it. She hung it at eye level, not as a memorial, as a presence. She had her father's binder framed, not the whole thing, just the first page, the one with Ray's handwriting across the top. A running record, with dates and names and the quiet certainty of a man who believed that the right information in the right hands was worth more than any lawyer. Cole saw her hang it and didn't say anything. Some things you let be what they are. The nursing certification paperwork is still in the glove compartment of her truck. She's decided to leave it there. Not because the answer changed, but because the question did. Ray's Diner is still on Route 66 in Solano, New Mexico. The pie is still made from the recipe in the spiral notebook, which Maya never needed to ask about because she'd watched her father make it enough times. The coffee is still strong enough to matter. The corner booth still has the cracked vinyl seat and the view of the parking lot and the highway beyond it. The Harley Softail is parked outside most mornings. It's been serviced twice since Frank's nephew first looked at it. It's in better shape now than when Cole rode it into Solano, which is the right direction for things to go. The biker community found the diner the way communities find places that deserve to be found, through word of mouth, through the particular informal network of people who ride and talk and listen. On weekends, the parking lot sometimes has a dozen bikes. Truckers still come, because truckers have always known where the real coffee is. Families still stop, because Route 66 still moves people, even the ones who aren't entirely sure why they're on it. Last August, on the anniversary of the Wednesday morning when a man in a road-worn jacket walked through the door and said 2 words that changed the direction of everything, Maya set 2 cups on the counter before opening. One for herself, one for the stool beside her. Cole came in from the parking lot, still carrying his helmet. "You didn't have to wait," he said. "I know," she said. He sat down. She slid him the coffee. They drank it in the particular silence of 2 people who have learned that some things don't need to be said, because saying them would make them smaller than they actually are. Outside, the highway moved. A truck, westbound. Then a motorcycle going east. Then nothing. And then the white morning light of Route 66 coming in through the window the way it always had, the way it would tomorrow, and the day after, and for as long as there was someone willing to stay. That's what I carry out of that Wednesday morning in Solano. Not the 2 words. The words were the beginning. What I carry is everything that came after. The woman who stayed, the man who stopped, and the diner that proved that some things are worth more than the number on a piece of paper, if you have the patience and the nerve to make the case. Route 66 doesn't need to be famous. It just needs people who refuse to let it disappear. I know because I was there. Sitting at the corner table with the cracked vinyl and the view of the highway, watching the whole thing unfold. I've been back every summer since. The coffee's still good. The pie is better.